So in Vedic astrology, planetary relationships are one of the most important concepts to determine whether a planet is healthy or unhealthy in your consciousness. So planets are treating all the other planets as either a friend, as neutral, or as an enemy. And these planets are interacting through conjunctions, through aspects, and through their sign placements. And you can think about it as if you're interacting with an enemy in your life or having to go to your enemy's zone or location. It's going to affect you how you're expressing yourself in that situation. So we call these planetary relationships Lajjitaadi Avasthas, which is a Sanskrit term that essentially means the conditions of the planets. So you can think of each planet or each force within us, a force of human nature, as having a certain agenda. And how well you can fulfill that agenda, or how well that planet can fulfill an agenda, it depends on if they have friendly planets or unfriendly planets working for or against them. So if you would like to know the full extent of your Lajjitaadi Avasthas in your natal chart, it's an important part of my written report, and you can find that written report at jmvedic.com. So today we're talking about the one enemy of Mercury, which is the moon. So the relationship between the moon and Mercury is unique amongst all the planets because these are the only two planets where one planet treats the other one as a friend, while the other one treats the other one as an enemy. So the moon treats Mercury as a friend, meaning that Mercury helps the moon with her agenda, with her significations in our consciousness. But at the same time, Mercury treats the moon as an enemy. So Mercury simultaneously is getting hurt by the moon's influence upon it. So why does the ever-changing moon, our subjectivity and our ability to adapt to the world, why is that hurting Mercury? So it relates back to what I was speaking about in the Exalted Mercury video about the curiosity within us, our interests in life, what we're interested in, and the moon impacting that part of our consciousness. Basically what ends up happening is there's way too much change happening. And the result is the classic mercurial problem of being a scatterbrained person, having a very low attention span and not able to dig your feet into something and seeing it to the end, whatever that thing may be. So the constantly changing moon connected with the curiosity of Mercury, there's too much focus on the movement of things and not being able to become stable in a single thing. So an unhealthy Mercury being affected by the moon struggles with sustained focus and the ability to concentrate. So these people are the social butterfly types of people. They will blow wherever the wind takes them, like a leaf in the wind, which is a kind of fun personality. They'll bounce around and flow with life, and it's kind of enviable when you see these people because you kind of wish you were as carefree as them. But this ends up not becoming a long-term way to live. It can work out when you're young, in your youth, when you're figuring things out, and when you're trying to figure out what you want to do with your life, experimenting with different paths and seeing what works and what doesn't. But you'll see these people still floating around in their 30s and 40s, and they haven't anchored themselves in anything. Now, some people, they love this nomadic lifestyle. They thrive in it. And those people, they oftentimes have this Mercury moon connection with them. And they're able to figure their lives out, although that kind of lifestyle can become very stressful over time. To live in the van or something like that, just always be traveling. People can work and become good at that. But when it becomes unhealthy is when you start to realize that it's not actually improving my life. Mercury is meant to improve your life, to have things on the up and up over time, becoming better at certain things. If you don't see your life improving and only getting more stressful, and you're living a nomadic lifestyle, it becomes unhealthy. There's too much change. There needs to be more stability and there needs to be more solidness, like how Mercury exalted in Virgo. It's a practical, solid earth sign concerned with the practicalities of life. So in the more small scale, the signs of an unhealthy Mercury, they tend to be very obvious when you see them in people. And one of the first ones is the procrastination element. They'll be occupying their time with something that is not of immediate concern. They need to be taking care of more urgent things, but they just really never get to them. I talked about this in the second video about the debilitated Mercury. And you'll also see the Mercury-Moon relationship play out in having a social media addiction or smartphone addictions, which is kind of a modern social butterfly person, but way less attached to the real world. What they're doing is they're getting so lost in all of the stimulus that is immediately available online. So that, of course, is the low attention span person, the constant changeability that is unhealthy and leading them down to a path of essentially wasting their time. And you'll also see that these people are very indecisive and they'll want other people to be making decisions for them or show them what path to take in life because they're unable to really fix on something for a durable period of time, for a certain period of time. And so it ends up they're unsure and confused about what path or what option to take in their life. So the first problem is excessive changeability and being an ungrounded person in general. Having your feet on the ground and your head in the sky, it's a nice way to live, actually. It's being imaginative, head in the sky, but also being practical, having your feet on the ground. But head in the sky, feet in the sky, just floating through life and not making many practical adjustments or changes, changing what needs to be changed and just floating around, you eventually get blown around by life and it can lead to all other sorts of problems when the nomadic lifestyle ends up not serving you in the way that you imagined kind of the freedom of being a nomad would serve you. Again, some people really thrive in that kind of situation, but if you're not a nomad, but your mind is in this kind of nomadic, always changing world, that is a sign of a Mercury moon problem. So the moon in our consciousness is our imagination, our ability to project a vision, our vision and our subjectivity into the future and being able to imagine possible scenarios of what we desire to have happen in our life. And Mercury is this ability to play and experiment with these possibilities you're imagining and see if it's actually working. So you'd think that this would be an excellent combination and it would create the kind of visionary types of people. But the problem is that Mercury and Moon combination, it causes a lack of the ability to distinguish between that subjectivity and the reality. So distinguishing between fantasy and reality. What am I imagining and what is the real thing? These things become way too enmeshed and a person becomes confused about what is real and what their subjectivity is saying is real. There's the subjective reality and the objective reality. And this is very similar to how we talked about how the debilitated Mercury in Pisces in the second video about how they get lost in the abstract and they get confused about what is real and what's not real. And it's kind of the suffering of Mercury in water signs. That's what happens. Mercury is so objective. Water signs, this emotional world, when those become confused, you're setting yourself up for a lot of internal turmoil and confusion in general. So Mercury negatively affected by the moon, as we can see in natal charts or in life, you'll see that these people are very interested in psychology and also oftentimes in literature, especially fiction. And they will really be dedicated to understanding the emotional side of life. And I'll talk more extensively about emotions here in a moment. But the tendency for this unhealthy Mercury is to be swimming in this emotional, or to swimming in these possibilities, swimming in the psychology without regard to the observable facts and having this kind of wanting emotions to be objective. But they really never are. Emotions are these personal experiences we have. And so trying to be too factual, it's like kind of you could say about the DSM-5, trying to standardize subjective experiences into this formula that everyone has to fit themselves into. You could say that's a poor use of Mercury. People have all of these unique lifetimes of experience and then trying to systematize those experiences into factual data sets and saying that is what's real, this is what's objective, and kind of ignoring the emotional reality of what's going on, that everyone is different and has patterns of similarities between experiences, but trying to factualize emotions to an unhealthy degree is this Mercury problem. So as we talked about so much, one of the key parts of Mercury is manifestation, when you're able to essentially use your hands to turn your thoughts into reality. So when the moon is getting involved with Mercury to an unhealthy degree, and very much so when Mercury is in the moon sign Cancer, you'll see these people really struggle to communicate and manifest through communication, which Mercury is communication, about what they're feeling into words. Or they'll get very easily swept up in their emotions and their subjective self and in their thoughts, and they don't have this really dependable way to broadcast their inner world to other people. they struggle with communicating what they feel. Now, probably the most central way that Mercury gets negatively affected by the moon is through the moon's full, complete preoccupation with our inner emotional health and our emotional world. And this happens in two important ways. So Mercury is how we're able to objectively read the world, to factually see what's going on around us, to be able to take in information, these facts and ideas, and process them to be able to determine what is true or may be true for us and therefore useful for us. So when the moon interrupts this process, the person becomes incredibly emotionally invested in the information, and they're going to skew the information so that it fits into their subjective worldview, and also specifically so that it fits into their emotional needs, what they feel they need. They need the information to validate what they're feeling. So these people will use phrases like, I need this to happen, or if this doesn't happen, or if that isn't true, I don't know what I'll do. So when the moon makes Mercury emotionally invested in information, it's instantly starting to twist and skew everything, to skew the information and what the information is actually saying. So you're no longer this objective observer and this objective learner. You're instead trying to validate yourself and validate your subjective worldview by what you're bringing in. And so what that is cognitive dissonance. When you choose information that selectively fits into your bias, without this ability to absorb new information, or not having a desire to absorb new information, or even just ignoring information that's going to be contrary to your beginning bias. So cognitive dissonance can happen in any sort of area in our life. And a lot of the times it's selectively ignoring facts. And there's a million examples of not being honest with yourself or about what's really going on in your life. And there's a funny story that my mom told me about her mother, my grandmother. When her youngest daughter, when she was 17, the police caught her and her friends. They had a case of beer in their car. And at this time, the drinking age in Wisconsin was 18. So she was 1 year under the legal drinking age. So what she was doing was illegal. So the police brought my aunt home to my grandmother, and the police told her that they got caught with a case of beer. They probably had a few drinks. The case wasn't unopened. And my grandmother just said, oh, okay, that's fine. I know she wasn't drinking. She was probably just holding the case for her friends. And it's an innocent and kind of naive response. And my mother and her sisters, they like to laugh about that story. But my grandmother simply didn't want to believe the information that the police was telling her. She wasn't drinking. She was just holding the case for her friends. She did that. It was a kind of cognitive dissonance, but she was so emotionally invested in the idea that in the safety of her daughter and the purity of her daughter. But so the bottom line of when the moon negative affecting Mercury, the person becomes afraid of things being true. And oftentimes it's subconscious. It's usually always subconscious, but it tips into the conscious area. That can't be true because of this, and this. They're afraid of it. They're emotionally affected. They don't want to be hurt, or they don't want to be shown that they're wrong about something. It's too damaging to their ego. And we know the moon is our ego. And you see this kind of behavior everywhere these days and in so many sectors of society. And not all of these people have Mercury in Cancer or Mercury with a strong aspect from the moon, which shows us that we can suffer from all these Mercury moon problems, regardless whether it's in our natal chart or not. So it means that we have to work on these psychological tendencies. We can easily fall adrift into these negative habits about these forces in our human nature, these negative behavioral or thinking habits. So now the other main way that the moon negatively affects Mercury is in friendships, and the ability to be a good friend, to have friends, what kind of friends you have, and how you relate to friends these are all Mercury parts of us. This is all Mercury working in our consciousness. It rules all of these things. It is all of these things. So again, the moon is our emotional center. It's our heart, and it's our feelings about ourselves and other people. So when that is affecting Mercury, the person puts their own emotional needs front and center in a friendship. A quality friendship is really built around mutual interests. And it's the natural harmony and the give and take of a conversation, that resonance between two people that just flows. And of course, mutually supporting one another. So being a good friend also means that you're helping another person, you're supportive of that other people emotionally and materially if they need it. And so again, you would think that the moon is helping Mercury with these things. But the case is otherwise. What happens is that the person with the unhealthy Mercury being affected by the moon, it uses friendships to make them feel better about themselves. It's like friendships become like this tool so that they can get this kind of emotional satisfaction. And that becomes a primary motivation for looking for and maintaining friendships for these people. So these people so there is that positive impact of Mercury helping the moon. Because remember, it's not a two-way street. The moon likes when Mercury is around. So these people they'll have emotional support system with their friends. And friendships will include emotions. But more often than not, what happens is that they'll bring it back around to themselves and what they quote unquote need that friend to do. So if that friend is unable to take on that emotional role, then these people will very quickly disregard the friendship entirely, and they think that friendship is unuseful to them because they didn't satisfy this emotional need that they have. So I've seen people take this to an extreme, and the person with an unhealthy Mercury, they don't have a genuine concern for the other person, but they make it seem like they do, and they make it seem like they're concerned about the other person. But what they're doing is they're kind of just waiting for the other person to finish talking so that they can start talking about themselves. Or they'll initiate contact with another person because they have this need to talk to the friend about whatever they want to talk about, not really what is mutually interesting to both people. So what it comes down to is using friendships as a way to boost your own ego and to use friends in order to manipulate a situation in order to get what you desire. And a lot of times these people will not maniacally, but very calculating. Mercury is good at calculating things, but calculating that friendship is going to get me where I need to go. So just using friends as pawns in your own game to get what you desire, to get your ego where you want to get your ego. And that so-called friend, if that so-called friend is not available for whatever reason, or is for some reason resisting the pursuit of this person who needs that friend to do something for them, that person just moves on to the next potential friend. So it's a very kind of manipulative when it gets really bad. There has to be other factors in the chart, but this is what can happen, Mercury and Moon. Really this cynical use of friendships as a way to get where you want to go. And they don't really care about the other person. They just see them in relation to themselves. It's a very egoistic and it's a very superficial way of living, and it's a very superficial way of treating other people. So working to heal this in your consciousness, it often requires very painful lessons that they see that other people are falling out of their lives and they end up left alone. And they look around like, where did all my friends go? Well, you've manipulated all these situations or you cast these friends aside as secondary. And when they want something from you or they want some emotional help, all of a sudden you've disappeared. And they maybe wanted to talk about something, but you were too busy. And what happens is that those people, if you see them, they fall out of your life, they didn't feel they were being listened to by you. You were feigning interest in their life. It was not a mutual two-way street. And a good way to get out of this habit is simply not asking for anything from people who you consider as your friends. This is a good way to start. We've all probably met these people when it feels like when they get in contact with you and you're making small talk, and you just know that at the end of the small talk, you're just waiting for the real reason to come out for why they got into contact with you. It's because they need a favor or they need something from you. And there is another reason for why they're getting in contact. It's like they can't just say hello, or they can't just send a funny meme to you, or they can't just send a quick message, hey, I hope all is doing well with your family now, or hope this is going well, hey, how did that go? There's always an ulterior motive. And it's like they have to ask for something that they want, and that want might be your energy, or your time, and in the worst, sometimes in your money. But those friendships really don't last when it's just about money. So it complicates the relationship, the friendship, and it feels like the other person has this desperate need to suck energy from the other person. And so that's what happens when it's a very serious moon starving Mercury. You feel like it's kind of vampiric in a way, that friendships are not mutually beneficial, they're not fun, it's another person who is extremely needy. And so if you find yourself to be that person, practice asking less and less from other people and work on that neediness. And it's usually emotional neediness and complaining about your problems way too much, or depending on other people to do the work for you. And when I say work, I mean the psychological work and the emotional work, instead of throwing emotional baggage onto other people. So these kinds of people can end up being the kind of people who go to therapists every week for years and years, so that they have someone they can throw their emotional baggage onto. And these people come to see their therapist as their friend who genuinely cares. But if you stop paying them, then of course the relationship changes. And you see that they are there superficially for you, which can be beneficial. Therapy is beneficial, but there's a superficiality to this friendship you supposedly made that reflects how you were treating other people as superficial tools to a plan. And it's what I prefer and like so much more about astrological therapy, is that we can use these principles of astrology and of these forces in our consciousness to get to the heart of an issue very, very quickly. And the more we understand these forces, the more we can work on them more acutely and more specifically. So going to an astrologer once a year to say, maybe look at recent transits, or going maybe 2-3 times maximum, that is completely sufficient if you're working with an astrologer. But a therapist is going to be expecting, traditional therapists are expecting a lot more time, sessions, and money with you. So that kind of way of working on your emotional world, or trying to establish a connection with somebody in a friendship through the emotional connection and putting that baggage on other people, that relationship with a therapist is only essentially getting you tied into a really long-term financial relationship. And of course, astrology includes so much more spiritual understandings, so much more profound things. And so essentially what I'm saying is that when the moon has this emotional need for friendships to validate them, or for other people to validate their egos, what you're dealing with actually is a very poor Mercury being affected by the moon, where you can't just see how other people can have this objective kind of neutral relationship with other people, and making it too much about yourself. So along with that, of course, the threat of a very bad habit of cognitive dissonance, when you want facts to line up to your feelings, and it's extremely difficult, or you're very hesitant to accept facts that don't line up with your current belief system. The way to work on this is to work on being as objective as possible about things happening around you. And that sounds a lot easier than it is. But it's working on taking things in life for what they are. It is what it is, instead of what you want them to be. And most importantly, don't be afraid of being hurt. The truth hurts sometimes, but it makes you stronger and more resilient over time. So at the end of the day, what your ego, what your moon feels about a situation, it's so much less important than actually making the situation better. And sometimes it takes your ego to take a hit, but that's going to be better for you long term, rather than insulating your ego and coddling yourself or coddling other people when life gets hard, or when you're faced with the difficult reality. Instead, take facts for what they are, and be able to take the straight facts about what's happening around you with just a very straight face, and with a very comfortable and almost neutral approach to it. Don't allow emotions to influence what you decide to bring into your life, what facts and information that you want to bring in. Keep emotions and facts separated.